The cafeteria was buzzing with noise, kids laughing, trays clattering, and the smell of pizza and fries filling the air. But then, splash! A tray of spaghetti flew through the air, sauce splattering like red rain. It was aimed right at Lila, the quiet girl sitting alone at the corner table, her nose buried in a book. The whole room froze as the tray soared, everyone knowing who threw it. Mason, the biggest bully in 5th grade, with his smug grin and 2 cronies snickering behind him. The spaghetti was about to drench Lila, her plain gray hoodie, and her book. But then, wham! In a blur, Lila's hand shot up, catching the tray mid-air. Sauce dripped onto the floor, but not a drop touched her. The cafeteria went dead silent. Lila's eyes, usually hidden behind her messy brown bangs, locked onto Mason. They weren't scared. They were fierce. Mason's grin faltered. "What the?" he started, but Lila stood up, slow and calm, still holding the tray. She tilted her head, like a wolf sizing up prey. Then, in one swift move, she flipped the tray back at Mason. Spaghetti slapped his face, sauce dripping down his chin. The crowd gasped, then burst into cheers. Mason wiped his face, red with rage, and charged at her. But Lila moved like lightning, sidestepping him and grabbing his arm. In a flash, she twisted it behind his back, pinning him to the ground. "Don't ever try that again," she whispered, her voice low but sharp as a knife. Mason whimpered, his cheek pressed to the floor. The lunch monitor shouted, rushing over, but Lila was already walking away, picking up her book like nothing happened. Everyone stared, jaws dropped. Who was this girl, and what was she hiding? As Lila slipped out of the cafeteria, Mason scrambled up, his eyes burning with a promise. This wasn't over. The day started like any other at Hillview Elementary. Lila was the new kid, only there a few weeks, always sitting alone. She was small, with a faded hoodie and sneakers that looked too big for her feet. She never talked unless a teacher called on her, and even then, her answers were short, her voice soft. Kids whispered about her. Some said she was shy. Others thought she was weird. Mason, though, saw her as an easy target. He ruled the 5th grade with his loud voice and mean pranks, picking on anyone who seemed weak. He'd trip kids in the hall, steal snacks, or dump juice on their homework, laughing as they cried. No one dared stand up to him, not even the 6th graders. That morning, Mason had been louder than usual, strutting around the cafeteria with his buddies, Jake and Tyler. They were picking on a 3rd grader, making him hand over his cookies. Lila sat nearby, reading, not looking up. Maybe that's what bugged Mason, her quietness, like she didn't care about his power. "Hey, bookworm," he'd called, tossing a grape at her. It bounced off her table, but she didn't flinch. The other kids giggled nervously, waiting for her to react. She didn't. That's when Mason's eyes gleamed with a plan. "Let's make her notice me," he muttered to Jake, grabbing a tray of spaghetti from a kid who wasn't paying attention. Lila's table was in the corner, away from the chaos. She liked it there, nobody bothered her, or so she thought. She was reading about knights and battles, her favorite kind of story, when she heard Mason's laugh. It was sharp, mean, like a hyena's. She didn't look up, but she felt his stare. She'd seen kids like him before, bullies who thought they owned the world. Lila had learned long ago to stay quiet, to blend in, but she also knew how to handle trouble. Her dad had taught her things moves she'd practiced in secret, punches and flips she'd never shown anyone. "Only use them if you have to," he'd said. Lila hoped she wouldn't have to. But Mason was pushing her, and she could feel the air change, like a storm was coming. The other kids sensed it too. The cafeteria got quieter as Mason walked toward Lila's table, tray in hand. Jake and Tyler trailed him, whispering bets. "Bet she cries," Jake said. "Bet she runs," Tyler added. They didn't know Lila. Nobody did. Not the real her. She kept her head down, but her fingers tightened on her book. She heard Mason's sneakers squeak closer. She smelled the spaghetti sauce, and then she felt it the moment he decided to act. The tray was about to fly. Her heart raced, but her mind was clear. She wasn't scared. She was ready. And then it happened. The tray sailed toward her, sauce glinting in the air. The cafeteria held its breath. What happened next would change everything. But as Lila caught the tray, her eyes flicked to Mason, and for the first time he looked small, scared. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, but nobody moved. Lila stood there, tray in hand, her face unreadable. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Mason on the floor and a question hanging in the air. What would he do next? The school buzzed with whispers after the cafeteria showdown. Kids huddled in groups, replaying how Lila, the quiet girl, had flipped Mason, the untouchable bully, onto the floor like he was nothing. By the time the afternoon bell rang, the story had grown. Some said Lila had punched Mason. Others swore she'd thrown the tray like a boomerang. But Lila, she was back at her desk in Ms. Loss. Carter's class, reading her book, her gray hoodie pulled up, acting like nothing had happened. Her classmates stole glances at her, curious and a little scared. Who was this girl who could take down Mason without breaking a sweat? But Lila kept her eyes on her book, her face calm, like a lake hiding a storm beneath. Mason, though, was fuming. He sat in the principal's office, spaghetti sauce still staining his shirt, his arm sore from Lila's twist. Principal Harris gave him a week of detention, but Mason barely listened. His mind was on Lila. Nobody humiliated him like that, nobody. Jake and Tyler waited outside, whispering nervously. "She's got to be some kind of ninja," Jake said, eyes wide. "Shut up," Mason snapped, storming out. "She's just a stupid girl who got lucky." But deep down, he wasn't so sure. Lila's eyes, sharp and fearless, stuck in his head. He'd never seen anyone move like that, so fast, so sure. It made his stomach twist, not with fear, he told himself, but with anger. He needed to get even. He needed to show everyone he was still the king. Back in class, Lila felt the stares but ignored them. She wasn't here to make friends or enemies. She just wanted to get through the day, like always. Her dad's words echoed in her mind. "Stay low, Lila. Don't let them see what you can do." She'd broken that rule today, and she knew it might cause trouble. But Mason had pushed her too far. She could still hear the cafeteria's cheers, feel the weight of the tray in her hands. For a second, it had felt good to fight back. But now, she sensed eyes on her, not just from kids, but from Mason's friends across the room. They were plotting something. She could tell by the way they leaned close, whispering, glancing her way. Lila turned a page in her book, pretending not to notice, but her ears were sharp, catching bits of their words. After school, show her, Mason's plan. The rest of the day crawled by. Lila kept to herself, but the air felt heavy, like before a big rain. At recess, she sat under a tree, away from the noisy playground. A few kids tried to talk to her, asking about the cafeteria, but she just shrugged. It wasn't a big deal, she mumbled, hoping they'd leave. Most did, but one girl, Sarah, stayed. Sarah was small, with glasses and a nervous smile. "That was awesome," she said softly. "Nobody ever stands up to Mason." Lila looked at her, unsure. "I didn't mean to," she said. Sarah tilted her head. "But you did, and now he's mad. Be careful, okay?" Lila nodded, but her mind was already racing. Mason wasn't the type to let this go. After school, the hallways emptied fast. Lila packed her bag slowly, watching the clock. She knew Mason would try something. She'd seen it in his eyes. As she walked toward the exit, she heard footsteps behind her. Not loud, but sneaky, like someone trying not to be heard. She kept her pace steady, her heart thumping but her face blank. Outside, the schoolyard was quiet, most kids already gone. She turned a corner by the bike racks, and there they were, Mason Jake, and Tyler blocking her path. Mason's grin was back, but it was meaner now, his eyes glinting with revenge. He held a water bottle, the kind you squirt, filled with something dark and sticky. Cola, maybe. Or worse. Well, well, bookworm, Mason said, stepping closer. Think you're tough now, huh? Jake and Tyler laughed, but it sounded forced. Lila stood still, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hands loose at her sides. She didn't answer, just watched him, her eyes steady. Mason's grin twitched. He didn't like her silence. Let's see how tough you are when you're soaked, he said, raising the bottle. The other kids backed up, waiting for the show. Lila's fingers curled slightly, her body ready, like a spring coiled tight. Mason squeezed the bottle, aiming right for her face. The dark liquid shot out, and everyone held their breath. But then, swoosh! Lila ducked, so fast she was a blur, and the liquid splashed the ground behind her. In the same move, she stepped forward, close to Mason, her foot hooking his ankle. He stumbled, eyes wide, and the bottle flew from his hand, spraying Jake instead. The crowd gasped, some kids laughing as Jake yelped, wiping cola from his shirt. Mason caught his balance, his face red with fury. You're done, he shouted, lunging at her. Lila didn't flinch. She grabbed his wrist, twisted, and pushed him back, her movements smooth, like she'd done this 1,000 times. Mason staggered, but before he could try again, a teacher's voice cut through the air. What's going on here? Miss Carter was marching toward them, her face stern. Mason froze, his chest heaving. Lila stepped back, picking up her bag like nothing happened. The crowd scattered, whispering, as Miss Carter grabbed Mason's arm. To the office now, she said. Lila turned to leave, but Mason's voice stopped her. This isn't over, freak, he yelled, his eyes promising trouble. Lila didn't look back, but as she walked away, her heart raced. She knew he meant it, and next time, he wouldn't come alone. What would she do when he brought more than just his friends? The schoolyard incident spread like wildfire. By the next morning, Hillview Elementary was electric with gossip. Kids whispered in the halls, pointing at Lila as she walked to her locker, her gray hoodie up, her book tucked under her arm. Did you hear? She tripped Mason like he was nothing, one kid said. She's got to be some kind of secret agent, another whispered. Lila ignored them, but her stomach twisted. She didn't want this attention. She'd broken her dad's rule against a low, don't stand out. But Mason had pushed her, and now the whole school was watching. Worse, she knew Mason wasn't done. His promise, this isn't over, freak, rang in her ears. She could feel trouble brewing, like dark clouds before a storm. In class, Lila sat by the window, pretending to read. Her eyes scanned the pages, but her mind was on Mason. She'd seen his type before, at her old school. Bullies who got embarrassed didn't stop, they got meaner. She remembered the moves her dad taught her. How to block a punch, how to flip someone bigger, how to stay calm when her heart was pounding. Only use them to protect yourself, he'd said, his voice serious. Lila hadn't told anyone why she knew how to fight, not even Sarah, who kept trying to be her friend. Lila liked Sarah's kind smile, but she didn't trust anyone with her secrets. Not yet. Meanwhile, Mason was plotting. He sat in the back of the gym during PE, whispering with Jake, Tyler, and 2 older boys from 6th grade big kids with mean laughs. Mason's face was still red from yesterday's humiliation. She's not getting away with this, he hissed, rubbing his sore wrist. Jake looked nervous. Mason, she's weird. Did you see how fast she moved? Tyler nodded, wiping his glasses. What if she's, trained or something? Mason scoffed, but his eyes flickered with doubt. She's just a girl. We'll get her after school. By the old shed. Nobody's around there. The 6th graders grinned, cracking their knuckles. We'll teach her a lesson one said. Mason's smirk returned, but it was shaky. He needed this to prove he was still in charge. Lila noticed the group during PE. They kept glancing at her, their whispers too quiet to hear. She didn't need to hear them to know what was coming. Her dad had taught her to read people how their eyes moved, how their shoulders tensed. Mason's crew was planning something big. She felt a pang of worry but pushed it down. She'd faced worse than Mason before. At her old school, a boy had cornered her, called her names, shoved her against a wall. She'd put him on the ground in seconds, just like Mason. That's why her family moved. Too many questions, too much attention. Lila didn't want to fight again, but she wouldn't run either. The day dragged on, each class feeling longer than the last. Sarah tried talking to Lila at lunch, sitting across from her with a tray of nuggets. Mason's telling everyone he's going to get you, Sarah said, her voice low. He's got 6th graders with him now. Lila chewed her sandwich, her face blank. Thanks for the heads up, he said softly. Sarah frowned. Why aren't you scared? He's dangerous. Lila looked at her, her eyes steady. I'm not scared of him. Sarah leaned closer. Where'd you learn to fight like that? Nobody just does that. Lila hesitated. She wanted to tell Sarah, but the words stuck. Instead, she shrugged. Just something I picked up. Sarah didn't push, but her eyes said she knew there was more to the story. After school, the air felt thick with tension. Lila walked toward the bus stop, her backpack heavy on her shoulder. She could have taken the bus and avoided trouble, but she knew Mason would just find her another day. Better to face it now. She took a detour toward the old shed behind the school, a rusty, forgotten spot where kids rarely went. She heard footsteps behind her 5 sets, heavy and fast. Her heart sped up, but her face stayed calm. She reached the shed, turned, and saw them. Mason, Jake, Tyler, and the 2 6th graders, all smirking like they'd already won. Mason held a stick, tapping it against his palm. No teachers to save you now, bookworm, he said, stepping closer. The 6th graders spread out, blocking her escape. Jake and Tyler hung back, looking uneasy. Lila dropped her backpack, her hands loose at her sides. Walk away, Mason, she said, her voice quiet but firm. He laughed, but it sounded forced. You think you're tough? Let's see how you handle all of us. He swung the stick at her, fast and hard. The others lunged, ready to grab her, but Lila was ready. She ducked the stick, her body moving like water, smooth and quick. In one motion, she kicked Mason's legs out, sending him sprawling. One 6th grader grabbed for her arm, but she twisted free, elbowing him in the stomach. He gasped, stumbling back. The other 6th grader froze, shocked, as Lila spun and faced him, her eyes blazing. Jake and Tyler bolted, yelling, We're out! Mason scrambled up, his face pale. Get her! He screamed. But the 6th graders hesitated, seeing their friend doubled over. Then a shout cut through the chaos. Stop right now! It was Mr. Jenkins, the janitor, running toward them with a broom in hand. The boys scattered, Mason tripping as he ran. Lila stood still, breathing hard, her fists still clenched. Mr. Jenkins looked at her, then at the fleeing boys, his face confused. What's going on here, Lila? He asked. She picked up her backpack, her voice steady. Just a misunderstanding, sir. He frowned, but didn't push. As he walked her to the principal's office to report it, Lila's mind raced. Mason wouldn't stop not after this, and now she'd shown more of what she could do. The secret she'd kept so carefully was slipping out. What would happen when everyone found out who she really was? And what was Mason planning next, now that he knew he couldn't win alone? The next morning, Hillview Elementary felt like a pot about to boil over. Lila walked through the crowded halls, her hoodie up, her book clutched tight. Whispers followed her like shadow skids, calling her Ninja Girl, or the fighter. Some looked at her with awe, others with fear. A few even left notes on her locker. You're awesome. And teach me how to fight. Lila ignored them, but her chest felt tight. She'd wanted to stay invisible, but now she was the center of attention. Her dad's warning echoed louder than ever. Don't let them see what you can do. She'd broken that rule twice now, and she knew the cost was coming. In the cafeteria, Mason wasn't at his usual table. Lila scanned the room, her senses sharp. She spotted Jake and Tyler whispering with the sixth graders from yesterday, their eyes darting toward her. No Mason, though. That worried her more than seeing him. Bullies like him didn't just disappear, they planned. Sarah slid into the seat across from her glasses fogging up from her hot lunch. Lila, you gotta watch out, she said, her voice shaky. Mason's telling everyone he's got a big plan. He's saying he'll make you sorry. Lila nodded, chewing her apple slowly. What's he saying? She asked. Sarah leaned closer. He's telling kids you're dangerous, like you're some kind of gang member or something. He's got more people with him now, not just Jake and Tyler. Lila's stomach nodded, but she kept her face blank. Thanks, Sarah, she said softly. Sarah hesitated, then blurted, Why do you know how to fight like that? You're not normal. Lila looked away, her fingers tightening on her book. She wanted to tell Sarah the truth, but the words wouldn't come. Not yet. After lunch, Lila overheard more whispers in math class. A group of boys were talking about Mason meeting someone tough after school, someone who could handle Lila. Her heart sank. Mason wasn't just gathering kids, she was bringing in someone older, maybe even from outside school. Lila's mind flashed to her old town, where a bully had once called his cousin, a high schooler, to scare her. She'd handled it then, but it had forced her family to move. She didn't want that again. During class, Miss Carter noticed Lila's distraction and called her to stay after. Lila, is something wrong? She asked, her voice kind but firm. Lila shook her head. Just tired, ma'am. Miss Carter frowned. I heard about the shed. If Mason's bothering you, tell me. Lila forced a smile. I can handle it. But as she left, she wasn't so sure. The school day ended, and the air felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. Lila walked toward the bus stop, her eyes scanning the yard. She saw Mason near the school's back gate, talking to a tall boy she didn't recognize. He was older, maybe 14, with a leather jacket and a mean smirk. Jake and Tyler stood behind them, looking nervous, while the sixth graders from yesterday lingered nearby. Mason pointed at Lila, and the tall boy nodded, cracking his knuckles. Lila's heart raced, but she kept walking, her face calm. She could take Mason and his friends, but this new guy was different, bigger, stronger, and not from Hillview. She remembered her dad's lessons. Size didn't matter if you were fast and smart, but 5 against 1? Even she wasn't sure about those odds. As she reached the gate, Mason stepped in front of her, the tall boy at his side. Meet my cousin Derek, Mason said, his grin wicked. He doesn't like freaks who think they're tough. Derek towered over Lila, his shadow covering her. Heard you're some kind of fighter, he said, his voice low. Let's see it. The other kids formed a loose circle, some excited, some scared. Lila dropped her backpack, her hands ready, her eyes locked on Derek. She could hear her dad's voice. Stay calm, Lila. Find the weak spot. But before she could move, a loud honk split the air. A pickup truck screeched to a stop nearby, and a man jumped out Lila's dad. His face was stern, his eyes scanning the group. Lila, get in the truck, he said, his voice like steel. Mason froze, and Derek took a step back. Lila hesitated, her fist still clenched. Now, her dad said. She grabbed her bag and walked to the truck, the crowd parting. As she climbed in, she heard Mason whisper to Derek, Tomorrow. We'll get her tomorrow. Lila's dad drove off, his hands tight on the wheel. What happened? He asked. Lila stared out the window, her heart pounding. Nothing, she lied. But as the truck pulled away, she saw Mason's grin in the rearview mirror, and she knew tomorrow would bring the biggest fight yet. What was her dad hiding, and how would she face Mason's new ally?